Thank you for inviting me today. Reddit's not exactly known for great UX, so let's start with an acknowledgement of that from the beginning. You know, there are some people who I think charitably compare us to Craigslist, or they'll say, I'm nostalgic for that 90s look that you guys have, but I don't think they're exactly complimenting when they say that, even though they mean it in the best possible way. So, thank you for having me here anyway. We're in the process of changing some of that stuff. So I think it's important to keep in mind that despite being a 15-year-old company, design didn't exist at Reddit for most of its history. My predecessor started the design team about 3 years ago, launched a redesign a couple of years ago, and that was a huge step forward. Users came in droves. Things got much, much better. But if you think about the trajectory of like Google and Facebook and Reddit started out about the same time, and those guys all went, and Reddit went like that. And then, boop, little pop there at the end. And so we have a huge way to go to make our product attractive, to make it usable, to make it understandable, to make it something that all kinds of people from around the world want to come and participate in. So how about me? I've been there only about a year, so I have very little that I can take credit for. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've gone through and some of the things we're doing about those things. I've been at Amazon, I've been at Yahoo, I've been at MTV, a bunch of different places, leading teams, building design teams. Reddit is my 11th design team in the last 25 years that I have built. So I actually want to start out with talking about building design teams. And so, you know, it's interesting. I spend like 50% of my time recruiting people. Some of that's actually a kind of laziness, because the more great people that I get in to do great stuff at Reddit, the less stuff I have to do, which is kind of awesome. So I put a huge priority on recruiting people, and we have a pretty different approach to recruiting people. And I'm going to start by talking about this sort of little anecdote that I see all the time, because this is the major thing that I think we're trying to solve for. A designer, a product manager, and an engineer walk into a conference room. An hour later, the product manager walks out and goes, we have a plan, we're going. The engineer walks out and goes, we have a plan, I have to think about how we're gonna build that. And the designer says, I wonder what we're gonna do. And it could be 3 hours later or 3 days later, the designer comes back and says, I've got this terrific idea. And the product manager goes, we already decided. The engineer said, I've already started to build it. And the designer is frustrated because in order to move forward, they have to unwind the decision that happened before and sell this new decision that's happening. And I think that that points to something pretty fundamentally wrong with the way in which we approach design and in the way in which we approach interacting with these other teams. And one of the things we're trying to do is hire around some of those challenges. So I start out by looking at people's portfolios. And our approach to looking at portfolios is a little bit different, I think, than other people take. We're looking for reasons to say yes. So I think often when you look at a portfolio, you look at it and you go, I'm looking for a track record of great work repeated. I'm looking for predictability. And I think that it might be better to look for a reason to say yes. What's exciting here? What's the fundamentally interesting thing that this person has produced? And we're looking for then some reason to bring that person in and talk to them face to face. We also, from there, well, so what are we looking for? We're looking for smarts, creativity, and drive. That's really the only things that we're trying to hire for. That's kind of it. So what do we do next? We do no screenings. There's no recruiter screenings in design at Reddit. I hate to tell people this because I don't want you to like take our tactic, but it really changes the relationship between the candidate and the company. The first person that they hear from is from me. So I reach out to them with an email and I say, this project you did is really awesome. You should come in and talk to us about it. And we have them come in person and have coffee with us. We try to create an atmosphere of warmth. We try to talk to them about them. We don't ask them a bunch of hard questions, Because really what we're trying to do is help them to get an understanding of Reddit and why we're dealing with a bunch of cool things that they should be involved in. We've already seen their portfolio. We know they can do great design work, right? It also changes the sort of video game nature of recruiting. So if you think about a video game, you beat the little bosses, and then the medium-sized bosses, and then you beat the big boss and you get the job, right? So we try to turn that on its head so that you start out by talking to, for better or for worse, the big boss. And from the very beginning, you have an established relationship and you have an understanding of how this whole thing works. So the next thing we do is we do a whiteboard challenge. And the whiteboard challenge is something that if you guys are subscribed to Leading Design or other kinds of places, people are super upset about. And they're upset for a bunch of good reasons, right? So if it's a take-home test, it's work that you're asking someone to do for free. If it's a thing that is about your company, it feels like, why am I giving these guys free ideas or free project work? If it's a person who has a family they have to take care of, or they've got a second job, they don't have extra time for that particular project to be able to spend 20, 30 hours on that thing. So we've eliminated that entirely. We have people come in, it's 1 hour, it's everybody gets the same problem, and it's really not a design challenge. It's a creative problem-solving challenge. Because again, we saw their portfolio. We talked to them in person. We don't need to understand whether you can design or not. Like, unless you're misrepresenting your portfolio in some way, like, we don't need that. What we need to know is, are you the person who came up with the ideas that are represented in your portfolio? So it's a creative problem-solving challenge, and we use the metaphor of a city for what we do, because a city's a lot like what Reddit does. Our moderators are the ones that create the communities. They run the communities. We don't do that. As designers at Reddit, we're creating the infrastructure, the ground rules, the interconnects, the standards, and the ways in which people get from place to place. But ultimately, the moderators are the ones who run the individual communities. And so the city metaphor is really terrific as a way of understanding if designers can solve Reddit-type problems. And so we have people come in and do that. And frankly, it's the hardest part of our process. So, we have done about 60 of these, and we've hired about 6 people. So it's really tough. And then kind of the last thing we do is we have people come in and do a presentation. So coming back to the first piece, the product manager, the designer, and the engineer walk into a room. Between these 2 steps, they're really intended to screen for people who can work collaboratively in real time, face-to-face with cross-functional partners and with other designers, right? That's the thing that design often struggles with. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have people who need time, who want to do the research, who want to go away. It doesn't mean, to the Mencken quote earlier today, that our first idea and our simplest idea is always the one. But if we aren't there to work in real time with those teams, they're gonna do that stuff anyway, right? And so being able to be there to present our ideas, to tell stories, and to engage with those teams is really important. Okay, so that's the hiring part. We said we were gonna go through a bunch of different things. I'm gonna move on now. Collaboration versus critique. And so when I think about critique, you show up and you've got this much stuff. And then it gets narrowed down by interacting with everybody else. It's great for iteration, right? It focuses you on one thing, on a single solution. It's great cross-functionally because everybody gets to come in and throw rocks. But oftentimes, I think that the challenge is, do you have the right idea? And it's a way really of reinforcing what could be the wrong idea. So what we also do is we pair that with collaboration, where the designer shows up with the kernel of an idea and working mostly with other designers, works to broaden it out, potentially to multiple different kinds of solutions and multiple approaches. So let's look at that a little bit. I found this photo and I love it because I see the guy in the middle as the creative director there, and he seems to be telling the guy on top how he's supposed to trim that hedge. The best part is the part you don't see in the photo. He's also telling that lady what to do too. So I feel like critique is a lot this way. Whether you call it swoop and poop or whatever it is, someone comes in, they look at stuff and they tell you everything they think is wrong with it, tell you what to do. And ultimately, I think that leads to iterations. Iterations might be one of the biggest screw-ups in Silicon Valley, in my opinion. Right? Because if you got the wrong idea and you think you can polish your way to heaven, that doesn't work. You have to have the right idea to start with. And it's an interesting experience thinking about that versus my studio experience at a place like Frog, where if you showed up to a client and you said, this is your logo. Unless you're Paul Rand, that doesn't work, right? There's an expectation that you're gonna actually look at different ways to solve this. And it doesn't mean that one's pink and one's blue and one's purple, but they're all squares, right? Like these are just iterations. It means that we're actually looking at distinctively different options, different real solutions to this, which I think so often gets thrown out as part of the process, especially when you're running agile, you're on 2-week sprints, it's all local optimization. It's not global maximization. So we try to do a lot with collaboration, and we really think about improv comedy as the cornerstone of that, because in improv comedy, you say yes and. If you're on stage with someone and they say, you're riding a bike, you say, no, I'm not. Like the whole scene just stops, right? Instead, you say, well, where am I going? What am I doing? You feed off of each other to try to workshop ideas and build toward different kinds of outcomes that might be unpredictable as a part of the process. And so in that case, we get options. We get distinctively different things that we can test with our users, that we can test with our executives, that we can test technically to understand what the problem is, rather than just grinding away at something that might be fruitless. Think about the number of startups that fail. I think a bunch of them fail because they don't pivot, because they don't look at other options, because they work on what is an optimization strategy, which once you've got a market, once you've got something you know works, is awesome. But when you're trying to figure out what's going to work, and you're on a 2-week cycle where all you're doing is optimizing one idea, there's a really good chance that's not the right idea. It is statistically probable that's not the right idea. So transitioning really to the next section, this is something that's really about a learning that comes from so many of my own personal failures. And again, I talk to many of my colleagues who lead teams, and we're almost always talking about, I need a seat at the table. I need to set up process. I want design to be respected. I want design to be strategic. And we do a whole lot of talking where we want that to be the initial circumstance, as opposed to something that happens as a result of something we do ahead of time, right? So here's an example I like to talk about. Orange ice cream. So everybody now has a picture in their head of orange ice cream. Is it a cup or a cone? Does it have sprinkles? Is it orange flavored or orange colored? Is it sherbet, gelato, sorbet? No amount of talking, no amount of writing a spec is going to get us to the same picture or the same outcome of what that is. It's a giant waste of time. What we should be doing as designers is making ice cream for people to try, rather than describing ice cream and getting permission to then go make it later. Because when you make stuff and people taste it, they get excited about it, but even if they don't like it, you're on the same page. You're tasting the same thing, you're looking at the same product. So that's the one I had. Turns out it's carrot ice cream, right? But it could have been mango or papaya or all different kinds of things. We probably should make a bunch of different kinds of orange ice cream and let our users and our executives and our product managers and others taste it. So one of the things that we've done at Reddit is we do a huge amount of effort working on where we could go, illustrating product ideas long before they end up in a roadmap. Because once you're in roadmap and backlog and sprint, you're supposed to be making stuff and you're supposed to be delivering it to users. Again, even though you might not have the right thing. So when we look at this, I think a lot about establishing bidirectional communication with the rest of the organization. So when I came to Reddit, the team was working really great, but mostly they were at the receiving end of specs, solutions, and ideas from the rest of the company, and the expectation was that they would make those things for the rest of the company. That's what design's for, right? Like, you guys take ideas and you make them real. And again, what I find is that, coming back to the orange ice cream, if we just have a discussion about it, or if it's in the abstract, then it's hard to really make that something that people get excited about or really takes off. And design's special superpower, along with our friends in engineering, is to actually make stuff. So not only do we need bidirectional communication, but that bidirectional communication needs to be tangible. It needs to be designed stuff. It needs to be things that people are going to get excited about, not just specs and words and emails and Slack messages. So I forgot the bottom bar on this, so I screwed up my presentation. But here's the thing that we do that goes along with this. And so the word you're missing down here is transparency. And it's really radical transparency. So the thing that we do is everything design makes gets shown to the whole company. We put it on the wall. We put it up in Slack. We present it at all hands. We have a weekly deck that we circulate that's got everything that design has worked on, links to all the Figmas, links to all the Google Docs. And it's interesting because in my previous life, I stood on tables a lot, and I fought with product managers, and a lot of it was adversarial. And what I've come to discover is if you employ this transparency and you show the whole company all the stuff that you're working on, and if you're doing the orange ice cream thing where you're making really cool and interesting stuff, then you put your product managers in a wonderful bind. Because they're accountable now to the whole organization that has seen everything that you've made. And then when they make a choice, you back up, you guys choose. You choose. You're the ones in charge of this project. Which way are we going to go? And when they pick that, and 6 months later, people are looking at their phone and going, didn't we have something else that looked better than this, felt better than this, that we could have done? It becomes a way of having a much more even playing field in terms of your conversations and your work with all of your cross-functional partners. And everybody loves transparency. And frankly, your company and the teams get excited about this stuff, right? And part of that's because really good design, you throw away 99% of what you do. So it's an opportunity to show everybody that 99% of cool stuff that you've done, not just the 1% that actually gets done at the end. So at Reddit, we really think about design in 3 different stages, or 3 different activities. Again, coming back to throw some rocks at Agile. Agile's awesome for the making part. It's awesome for tactical. It's awesome for operationalizing, for optimizing what you've got going on. But Silicon Valley companies, all companies, need more different processes depending on what kinds of problems you're facing and what you're trying to do. And so we think about those as making, inventing, and dreaming. Those are the 3 activities that we have, right? So when we're making, for better or for worse, we're trying to make it a factory. We want to be hyper efficient. We want to get stuff done as quickly as possible, because every minute that we save here is time we can go do something else, right? So we really think about things like the Toyota way, Kaizen, continuous improvement. We really think about efficiency, just-in-time delivery, all those kinds of concepts that have been in business for a long time as a way of making our development processes really efficient. And this lines up really well with Agile, right? So that's the piece that we're doing there. But what a lot of us are fighting over, again, if I think about what my colleagues write on leading design, is the inventing part, the problem-solving part, right? And I put this up here in part because it's corny and trite, but when you think about the invention of the light bulb, Edison is credited with that, but he's not the guy who actually came up with the idea for the light bulb, right? He's the guy that tried 3,000 different kinds of materials to find the one that was easy to manufacture, that lasted the right amount of time and gave off the right amount of light. That's the kind of problem solving that we're often doing when we're talking to users. We're defining the problem, we're defining personas, we're grinding through all of those pieces. But it requires that our partners and the rest of the company come to us with problems and not solutions that we have to then unwind. And what's interesting is this is the part of the process that everybody's kind of fighting to own, whether they're PMs or engineers or designers or whoever. And so I will be honest, this is the part we are not good at yet, but it's also the part we haven't focused on the most. And it's the part where cross-functional partnership is the most important, and it's super complicated. The part that I think gets ignored the most is the dreaming part. And again, a special thing that really design is better equipped to do than anybody else. Where should this product go? Where should this company go? And again, thinking about the orange ice cream, not just talking about it in words that fail to capture it, things that are hollow representations of that reality, instead making actual software and designs and prototypes that illustrate that possibility. So what we do is design is a dreaming, I don't want to say factory because I used factory before, but it's really a dreaming mechanism for the whole company. We listen to the CEO, we listen to the head of product, we listen to the ideas that are coming from all over the place, and we illustrate them and make them real, and we let people taste them across the whole company. And what we find is that that then comes back in the top and feeds the roadmaps. And so when people talk about, I want to do strategic design, I want design to have strategic impact, I think that's the best way that I've discovered in 25 years to make that happen, is for us to be the center of dreaming and hope and possibility for what that company could do. That's it. Thanks for having me.